Aquabá! Welcome. Hello. Happy Sunday or whichever day it is that you're viewing this program. We are glad that you are here for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Today, our critical topic is analyzing the 2024 U.S. presidential elections, getting beyond the rhetoric and the talking points. It's 2024. We're all way too grown up, way too able to discern what's going on in the world to settle for weak and played out talking points like our ancestors died for the vote. You're betraying our ancestors if you don't vote. This is the most important election that we've ever had. The same old things that are said every 2 and every 4 years. We need a much deeper analysis of this U.S. capitalist electoral process than just simply that. So that's what we're going to get into today. Not for the weak of heart. If you're weak-minded and you can't handle challenges to, existing belief structures that you have, you should probably log off right now because you're going to be frustrated with this program. But for those that are interested in looking at these political processes and understanding them on a higher level, you are in the right place. So we give honor and respect to the native indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere whose land this rightfully belongs to. And we honor them in their struggle for justice and forward human progress. And we give honor, of course, to our African ancestors, the masses of African people from the East Coast of Africa and the Indian Ocean, all the way throughout the African continent to the West Coast of Africa and through the Middle Passage, through the Atlantic Ocean, and through the Americas, from Alaska all the way down to Chile. Each and every one of our ancestors who had the dignity and courage to stand up and fight for us, they are the only reason that we are here today. I'm talking about courageous ancestors who risked their lives because they knew that we as a people had to have that dignity. A lot of us today don't understand what we're talking about when we say that, because there's no dignity. Anything that you can get money for, you'll sell out for. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about the people who will sacrifice their lives so that we can have a better collective life, not just individualism, but a better collective life. Those are the ancestors that we honor. All of those Africans who come throughout history, who are the very reason why we're here today, whether we know it or not, whether we recognize it or not, is 100% immaterial. They are the reason why we're here today, and we give honor and respect to them.
Comrade Ajamu, you are
I know,
muted.
I hit it accidentally. Sorry. I'm good. Okay, so we acknowledge our program as we always do by just talking about who we are and what we do. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. The AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, pan-African political party with its base in Africa. We are not based in Louisiana or Chicago or Los Angeles or New York or the Bay Bridge or under the mountain in Colorado. None of that. We are based in the national home of African people everywhere we are on the planet Earth. That is Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism. In other words, our simple argument is that until Africa is free, no African anywhere on earth will be free. And that the reason why we are in the situation we are in today, in over 120 countries where we exist in sizable numbers, is because our mother is under siege, and our mother is Africa. And that's the crucial point, is until our mother is free and united, we will continue to suffer wherever we are. So that's what Pan-Africanism is. And that unification has to happen under one continental socialist government. Capitalism is the reason we're in this situation. It cannot be the solution. That's what Pan-Africanism is, short and simple. It has nothing to do with what you want to call Africa. Call Africa whatever the hell you want to call it. Our point is that whatever you decide to call it, We have to be connected to that land base in order to move forward collectively as a people. We're not talking about individual Negroes moving forward. We're talking about collectively as a people. In order to do so, we're going to have to be tied to that land base. Whatever the hell you want to call it that. It's irrelevant as long as we're connected to it. If you have a catchy name, I'll call it that, as long as we're connected to it. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is not just a whim of our ideas in our head or what we woke up this morning, we wrote down on a piece of paper last night when we were drunk, and we woke up this morning, we couldn't even understand what we wrote last night. That's not how we strategize to achieve Pan-Africanism. Instead, it's a scientific process outlined through the ideas articulated by Kwame Nkrumah in the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. If you're looking at our screen, you see it right there in the center. And that book lays out the strategy to achieve Pan-Africanism, uniting all of the revolutionary Pan-African forces on the ground throughout the African continent. That, my friends, enemies, undercover police, overcover police, that is the work of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We don't have buildings. We don't have gardens everywhere. We are 100% in favor of those that do, that are growing food to feed our people in their respective areas. We think that's wonderful work. We have a lot of schools. We don't have schools everywhere. We don't have brick and mortar. But what we do have is work that tangibly can be expressed in the fact that today there are Africans all over the earth who speak in English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Creole, Swahili, Wolof, etc., 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 German, and they are talking about Pan-Africanism being the solution to the problems people face and defining Pan-Africanism as one unified socialist Africa. That we do have. We think that that is a critical contribution to what needs to be happening to our people today, because it'll build the foundation for us to actually achieve the capacity to accomplish our goal, which is one unified socialist Africa. So our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and Shakura. We are related. She is my biological daughter. I am her biological father, but we are also, and more importantly, comrades in the struggle for African liberation within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So let's get this topic of the 2024 U.S. election started, and we will do that by turning it over to Shakura.
Thank you, kind sir. Greetings, everyone. We hope you are well. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Comrade Ajamu already pointed out, we have so much to discuss, and it is really imperative that we kind of think more about removing the propaganda that has already flooded our minds, flooded our hearts, and flooded our ability to be critical and to think with reasoning and logic. And so, we understand that for many of us, for colonized people, non-male people, marginalized genders, our non-binary folks, our queer family members and whatnot, all of oppressed people in the world, and especially in the US, we understand that we have accepted the capitalist misrepresentation of history, and that the fight for African people has been kind of balanced or waged, if you will, for the vote. And we have also been propagandized to think about and understand that that's why voting is a moral responsibility for everyone, because being able to see voting in the US allows for elections to be considered a principal meaning, and that, we have nothing else to contribute to our people. And if we choose not to vote, then we are doing a strong disservice to our people. We've got to unpack that, and we have got to think more about what that means. It is strongly supported that our African ancestors understood the importance of us organizing together and voicing ourselves and our needs. It is also strongly supported that they never intended for that one act of voting to be the only way that we can accomplish the things that we need to accomplish. And what you'll notice if you do the research, if you do increase your political education, you'll start to notice a trend with all of our ancestors, Malcolm X, Shirley Graham Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois. We even saw it with some of our other ancestors who were not born in the US and had more of a consistent ideology with pushing to support African people. We have Marcus Garvey. Of course, we have Kwame Nkrumah. We have Sekou Touré. We have all these different examples, Amilcar Cabral, of these folks who basically, if they weren't already Pan-Africanists, then they started to transform and to shift into that. And so my point is, they may have started off with thinking that voting was the only way to make change, but over time, they started to get more aware of the fact that there are several ways to make a difference. And every single person that I mentioned joined some organization that was working for justice at some point in their life so that they could do exactly what we are trying to do. They could make a difference for people. And notice how I said, maybe in addition to voting, if that's what they choose to do, but maybe not, because we understand that it's complete rhetorical BS to even assume that you could put that kind of pressure on someone, making them think that that's why they need to vote because their ancestors died for them to do so, when that couldn't be farther from the truth. That was one particular method that our folks were trying to get for us, but that wasn't the only reason our ancestors died. There were several reasons that our ancestors died. And the most important one is because they wanted us to be able to keep fighting after they passed on, after they sacrificed for us. And they wanted us to be better. They wanted us to be smarter. They wanted us to not accept the current systems of oppression that we are hopefully fighting against. But some of us have become laxed. Some of us are not fighting as much. Some of us are very comfortable taking on the house slave mentality when we need to be taking on the field slave mentality, and we need to pray for strong winds. So the thing that we need to understand, you all, is who exactly is telling you that your ancestors died so that you could have the right to vote? Is it someone who benefits from the capitalist system and wants very much to support the capitalist system? So therefore, by you becoming the puppet that they need you to be, are they able to now get more of their needs met by you doing what you need to do? Because let us be clear, whatever your purpose and intention of voting is, I would argue that you're doing it because you're trying to change the conditions that we're currently experiencing. Maybe you're fed up with how sucky education is in the US. Maybe you're upset with the reproductive justice current phenomenon in the US. Maybe you really want climate change to be addressed. Maybe you're really worried about other issues that need to be addressed, immigration, whatever the case may be, job security, whatever. So you could take any one of those topics I just mentioned, and you can think about how no matter what happens every 4 years, there's sort of a bell curve, if you will, where things may be quote unquote getting better, and then they tend to go down again. And that's pretty much a consistent pattern, regardless of who the House is controlled by, regardless of who's in the office, regardless of who the cabinet belongs to. The point we're trying to make, you all, is that you have to think about how the US was established. It was established by killing a large group of indigenous people, stealing their land, violating them sexually. It was also established by kidnapping a large group of African people, taking them away from their land and stealing resources on both the indigenous land as well as from African soil so that you could profit, so that you could benefit, so that you could establish your companies, so that your companies could establish roots and start to grow and be able to charge people lots and lots of money so that you could profit from the transatlantic slave trade. My dad and I just had a conversation the other day about the root of how capitalism got started. And it was very much because of the transatlantic slave trade. And yesterday, when we spoke in my work study meeting, we were talking about how insurance companies got started with the transatlantic slave trade because unfortunately plantation owners considered their enslaved Africans to be their property. And just like you would insure your vehicle or you would insure your house, you didn't want anything to happen to your property, right? We also talked about how Masters Lock, the company that makes locks, was the first to create shackles. The comrades mentioned some other examples that I didn't even know about. And so the point we're making, you all, is that most of the things that we use, that we understand, that we bounce ideas off of one another, that we've come to accept, especially in the US, you have to understand it is rooted in some type of inhumane past, some type of inhumane past. It has violated a group of people in some way, shape, or form for it to be what we are currently using and for us to be able to normalize using it in the US, including how the US got its start. So if you're telling me that you voting for a different person every 4 years is going to make a difference, I'm going to find that hard to believe because I'm not seeing those same topics that I mentioned: education, reproductive justice, job security, climate change. I'm not seeing that. Immigration. I'm not seeing those topics change so that the betterment of people can actually benefit. What I'm seeing is that we still have a class divide, which is very much how capitalism continues to stay fueled. And because we have a class divide, poor people are going to continue to be poor. Poor people are going to continue not to matter. Unhoused people are going to continue not to matter. Non-male people are going to continue not to matter. People who are not born with a silver spoon, people who don't have $100,000 of savings in their account, none of those things are going to matter, including if you're queer, including if you're differently abled. You are less than important if you have any of those identities that are attached to your person. And if you don't have those identities attached to your person and you have your stake in some type of private company that can profit and make money, then you still have sweat that you need to stress over because your now objective is to continue making money for that private corporation. That's what capitalism is. And the minute you stop making money for it, then you need to start to be worried. So it's not a just system is what I'm trying to say. It's not a healthy system is what I'm trying to say. So it doesn't matter who you vote for because the system itself is tainted. It doesn't matter who you vote for because the system itself is toxic. It does not matter who you vote for because the people who are interested in running this system are not interested in detoxifying it. They are not interested in doing that because capitalism to them is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful system. And I don't understand it for the life of me. I would do anything to deconstruct capitalism. I would do anything to tear it down. And I know there are several others out there who are like us who also want to tear it down, but we have our work cut out for us because our objective is to help persuade those who still feel like they need to protect it. It's not a system worth protecting. It does not deserve your protection. It dehumanizes people every single day and makes people feel like they are insignificant and that they are invaluable, not invaluable, unvaluable. So, because of that, why should we protect that? Why should we protect that when we're barely making ends meet and we're living paycheck to paycheck? And if you're not living paycheck to paycheck, it's only a matter of time because shrinkflation and inflation is going to continue to be a thing regardless of who's in office because the people who are making the products that we need are going to continue to need your money. So they're going to do by any means necessary to make sure that they get it. And they know that when you live in a winter element where the cold air is too deadly for you to not have heat, you're going to pay high money for that heating bill. They know that. They know that we don't have another option. We don't have organized resources to burn our own oil. We don't have organized resources to establish our own central heating on a grid that is powered by sun rays and things of that nature. They know that we only can look to the utility companies where we live. That's the reality, folks. That's the reality. And so we need to be very clear in understanding that none of this is a beautiful thing. None of this is pure heart. None of this is based on truth. None of it is based on justice. None of it is based on alliance or feeling like you are connected to someone. At the end of the day, it is all about which crook is less crooked to be put in office. And they both are supporting this capitalist system, which does not support you. That's the number one thing you have got to remember. Next slide, please. So we can also think about how when we start to really understand what's going on, we can start to think about how if we're looking at the system, then we can really visualize how this has been over time. Our ancestors have been communicating about this for a while now. So we can start to see the history with our own lens, if you will. You know, we can think about our comrades in Lowndes County, right? Lowndes County Freedom Organization organizers. In Alabama in 1965, the original Black Panther Party, they understood that voting was simply a tactic, not the end all be all, a tactic. And when we look at the word tactic, we understand that's a tool that we could use to make a difference, but it is not the initial groundbreaking only solution that we have. Usually, when you have tactics, you have multiple options on ways that you could do something. And so, when we think about Africans who were arrested, we think about Africans who were beaten, harassed, terrorized, even killed for the vote in the US. Don't misconstrue that with thinking that's why they died so that we could vote. That's what propaganda will tell you because they are using you. You have got to understand that. So you have to think smarter than that. And you have to understand the US understood that propaganda and that angle that they could push. And clearly, the vote was simply a tactic to achieve freedom for us, a tactic, a tool, an opportunity that we could use as a method. The thing about methods is there's always more than one way to do something. And so it was never intended to be viewed as a principle, never intended to be viewed as an uncompromising principle. Because the thing about tactics is there are more than one way to do something. And so, again, when we think about what's the intention of voting, usually is to change the conditions of, like I said, education, reproductive justice, whatever that may be. But when you think about it, there are several other ways that you can still have an impact on those circumstances that I just mentioned. I was talking about this to some friends just the other day, and I've been really pushing for them to start to think about things that they could do outside of voting because I'm trying to encourage them to join an organization that's working for justice. And if they're not ready to do that, at least as we prepare for this election in November, I'm trying to encourage them that they can at least start to think about other things that they could be doing. That way they can feel like they're making a difference. And so, you know, I have one friend that's really interested in helping children that are not on reading levels and whatnot. And so, you know, they were like, well, you know, I got to vote, you know, so we can improve the education. And I'm like, maybe. I said, but you know, you also could do a background check, submit your paperwork, volunteer at the department. I can't even think of the name now. The district. You could volunteer for the district, and you could go to different schools and read to the kids. You could also donate books to different schools every month, and you could have a theme associated with the books that you're donating. And you could take time out from work and go and read to the kids. You could offer tutoring, phonetic spelling and phonetic sound spelling cards and whatnot. I mean, there's several ways that you can make a difference. And voting has nothing to do with that. You can call them tactics if you want. We don't care. But that's the point of a tactic, is that it's more than one way to do something. The same thing with reproductive justice. There are several things that a person could do to address that because we cannot rely on capitalist people to determine the fatal outcome of African women and femme identifying bodies. We cannot. It is very clear they do not care about us. It is clear. So we should not expect them to. So we should start researching our own tactics on how to give birth to our children that does not rely on hospitals. There's no reason we should still be giving birth in hospitals. With the rates of maternal mortality, there is no reason. It makes no sense that that is the reality. And I'm saying that because I understand that we have insurance limitations. I understand that we have educational limitations. Not everyone knows what their options are. I totally get it. But at the same time, that's why we should be researching it. We should not just take what information is given to us and accept it. We should be critical, and we should be very interested in finding our own healthy ways to deliver our babies in a way where we feel affirmed, where we feel valued, where we feel listened to, and where we feel like there's a potential chance that we can survive this because of how affirmed we feel, because of how valued we feel, because of the fact that the provider actually let us finish our statement without cutting us off. Very simple, simple things like that. That means so much to us as African folks, as colonized folks, and as non-male folks, because we unfortunately are suffering from not only white supremacy and racism when it comes to delivering our children, but also patriarchy. So because of that, we need to seriously look at all our options. We also, if we're insistent on having hospital births, we should be looking at how we can find a way to make sure that we are doing all the research that we can do so that we know exactly what we're putting ourselves into. And so, again, these are different tactics that we can apply, and it can be the same when you look at what voting means to you. Now, we're not saying that you should not vote. We're saying you should understand why you do what you do, and you should be able to explain it if somebody asks you. And we are asking you to do more than just voting, like joining an organization that's working for justice or supporting a Pan-Africanist organization that is working for justice, and maybe consider joining next year, maybe consider joining in a couple of weeks. But there should be some type of motivation for you to feel like you have the capacity to make a difference yourself. You should not be relying on some capitalist person who's going to be in an office somewhere that you're not going to be able to access. You should not be relying on them to change your outcomes and to affect your world, because they're not going to put your best interest at heart. That's literally the opposite of what capitalism stands for. Their intention is to keep giving private corporations the opportunity to make money. Unless you work for a private corporation, you have nothing to do with that. So, thinking about more of what it means to be humanistic, thinking about more of what it means to understand that we are the ones that we've been waiting for. Our ancestors have already laid out what we need to do. We don't need to be relying on other people to change our conditions for us. A, because they could care less and they're not going to change them. They're going to continue to make them worse. And B, we already have the tools to fix it. We have the tactics, if you will, to fix it. We know what we need to do. The question is, why is it taking so long of us to actually stand up and do those things? Some of us are still more concerned about being self-centered. So we need to check into that. We need to tap into that. Some of us are working on persuading other people that they need to make a difference. Some of us have the ability to support these organizations when they're doing this work, when they're bringing breakfast programs to the community, when they're bringing battered, sheltered victims for domestic violence. We're looking for clothes to donate for domestic victims. And we don't support these entities when they come into our neighborhoods. Why is that? Don't we want to end these potential problems? Don't we want children to be fed and domestic violence to be eradicated? Don't we want these things to not be an issue? So then we need to figure out a way that we can hold ourselves accountable. You can't just pray that it's going to go away. And you certainly can't expect some capitalist person who's going to be in office for 4 or 8 years to make that go away when that's not their priority. It was never their priority. That's what we need to understand. I love how Comrade Ajamu said every year they say this is the most important election. Have you noticed that? Every 4 years they say that. Every 4 years they say that. Even if someone has already been in office, oh, this is the most important. But that's what you said 4 years ago. That's what you said 8 years ago. That's what you said in 2016. That's what you said in 2020. That's what you're saying now. That's what you'll say in 2018, 2028. Like, come on. We got to be smarter, you all. We got to be smarter. And we have to understand that these folks are making profit off of our choices and off of our ignorance. And we deserve better, and we should give better for a fighting chance for the people to come after us. Ashe.
Ashe, Obrigada, asante sada, midasi. Thank you very much, Shakura. And we're just going to continue on. We talk about understanding the U.S. electoral system, because this is, let me start by saying this, that we have to recognize today we are not the people we were 100 years ago. We just aren't. I mean, the capitalist system has worked over time to soften us. We're soft as butter now in 2024. We are soft as butter. And I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, for my job, we were out at one of the prison facilities. I work for a labor union. We represent the workers who work for the state of California, and a lot of them work in these backward ass prison facilities, unfortunately. And so we were there, and we were there to, help people understand the importance of belonging to a union, the people that work there. And I know people don't really know much about labor unions. So, when I'd say, well, we were at a prison, they're like, well, what are you doing? Are you helping the people incarcerated? Well, I wish that we were, but that's not, this job. We represent the nurses that work in the prison, the custodians, the cooks, the IT people. Prisons are like little cities. So they have hundreds, sometimes thousands of people that work there. And we represent all of those people. We don't represent the prison guards. I don't know if I could work there if we did, but we represent pretty much everyone else. And so we were there talking to the people we represented. A lot of them have issues, and we help them with the issues. And that's what we go out there and do as a collective. And so we were sitting, and it was one of these days, I live here in California, near the San Joaquin Valley, the agricultural center, one of the agricultural centers on the planet Earth. And it's very hot here in the summer months. It's constantly triple digit weather. It's dry heat, but it's hot. So this is one of those days when it was like 107, 108 degrees. And we were sitting there, and we were sitting under canopies, but it's still very hot. And so one of the European women who represents, she works there, but she's, one of the union people. She said, I can't take it anymore. I have to go. It's too hot. And, was the manager there. So I told her, well, go ahead and go, take care of yourself, do what you have to do. And she said, well, I don't understand how you could stay out here. And I said, well, my ancestors picked cotton in this weather. And she said, oh, she said, that is so disrespectful. And I said, look, your feelings are not my problem. Unless you can demonstrate to me that my ancestors did not pick cotton in weather worse than this, your feelings are completely irrelevant to me. But the point I'm making is that when she said it was too hot, a couple of the Africans there said, yeah, it's too hot. And that's why I said what I said, because there's this thing functioning right now where people really have allowed themselves to believe that their individual interests supersede everything else. And my thing, and it's this individualistic capitalist culture. Well, they have a right to believe that their truth is their truth. And to me, that's all a bunch of bullshit. You are the direct beneficiary of people who suffered every single moment of every day of their lives. And if they had adopted the poot butt attitude that so many of us have today, we wouldn't be here. We would have been extinct a long time ago. All over the world, we would be extinct. They had to struggle to make it through the day. And all we're concerned about is our comfort. They didn't have the luxury of worrying about their comfort. And so I mean, that's really a problem that has to be addressed. But as it relates to this electoral process, it's related to that, because we just want to be comfortable. We had a discussion at work Friday, and people were saying, well, social media, the algorithms are designed so that people are reinforced with happy things. And I told them, oppressed people don't have that luxury to constantly be reinforced with happy things. That's our problem today. We don't want to be uncomfortable for 2 minutes. We want to be comfortable and entertained the whole time. And that's why we're in the position we're in. And then we wonder why our youth don't respect us. Well, they respect me, but people my age wonder why they don't respect us as a whole. I don't ever have any problems with youth respecting me, but they talk about how their youth, their children don't respect. And I'm like, and I tell them, I don't respect you. I understand why they don't respect you. What is there to respect? because you got a damn Tesla and a house. That's nothing. That's nothing to be respecting you for. So they shouldn't respect you. You don't deserve respect. But the way we get that back, the respect, is that we got to have a clear understanding of who the hell we are and what the hell we're doing so that we can know where we need to go. When we start thinking that way, we will regain that respect that we've lost. And so let's start by just understanding some basic fundamental aspects of this backward system. Number one, the US Constitution framers, the people that framed this toilet paper document that you all call a constitution, they were all racist. Most of them were slaveholders, and if they weren't enslaving our people, they supported the institution of slavery. But people like James Madison, for example, the one who wrote the Second Amendment, the Gun Amendment, and was his family had been slaveholders for decades, right? He was one of the chief architects of the Electoral College. And if you don't know, the Electoral College is the system in place that facilitates national elections here in the United States of America. And the Electoral College has many variable reasons for why it was created. But one of the most important reasons was the fear on behalf of these Constitution crackers that they had to make sure that African people would always be held in check. And the Electoral College, one of the reasons that they created it was to ensure that that happened. They were afraid that if the popular vote was the only mechanism that facilitated elections happening, that if we continued to grow, and they knew that slavery would not be a sustainable system forever. They knew that. They acknowledged, if you read their writings, they talked about that. And they had all types of strategies for how to address that. One of which was to send us all back to Africa. Abraham Lincoln talked about that in his 7 years ago speech, or whatever the hell he was talking about. That was one of the things, was sending us back to Africa after slavery ended. So these crackers knew that. So they were afraid that if the popular vote was all that existed, that we would gain enough political power so that we would be able to influence this political system. And they didn't want that. So this is one of the major reasons that the Electoral College was created. And if you understand what the Electoral College is, you know that what it is that each of these 50 states here in the United States gets, no matter how many people vote in the popular election in that state gets a certain number of electoral votes. And the electoral votes are what are used to elect the president of the US. The popular vote is irrelevant. It's all about getting the electoral votes. So this is the reason why in 2016, Hillary Clinton got 3 million more popular votes than Donald Trump, but she didn't win the election because she didn't get the 270 electoral votes. That's all that matters. This is why in 2000, Al Gore got more votes than George W. Bush, but he didn't win the election because he didn't get the most electoral votes, the 270 electoral votes required to win the election. We've got to understand that, so that's one thing. And again, one of the main purposes of the Electoral College was to ensure a check and balance was put in place to control the popular vote. That's the only reason. Why else would you have something like that? If you're saying it's a popular election and the people decide, why would you need an Electoral College? That's because they didn't want y'all, African folks, and now other folks, and I got to give the crackers credit, because if you look at 2024, now you got all these indigenous people here. You got 50 million Africans. There's more indigenous people than there are us. That's 100 million people. You got millions of Asian people. You got LGBTQ people. You got women who have had, on some levels, an evolving level of consciousness. So these European men, these rich European men, if all that they had was the popular vote, they would be in serious trouble today. So they have the vision to recognize that. So in terms of, from their perspective, the Electoral College was a very intelligent decision to ensure that their interests were maintained. An example of that is if you look at how the system is structured today. This is the case. You take states like Rhode Island, almost all European, Maine, almost all European, like in the 90 percentile European, these states. Montana, almost all European. You don't know if you know one African that lives in any one of those three states. That's a special thing. And most of you don't know any. Most of you've never been to either of those states. You never will go there. You don't know any Africans there because there are very few. They're European states. They're white states. They were designed that way. So those three states, for example, they have a combined population of 3.5 million people. They're small states. They're not largely populous states. And that was the whole idea behind the Electoral College, because those three states combined have 12 Electoral College votes. You can look it up yourself if you think I'm lying to you. They have 12 Electoral College votes for 3.5 million people between the three states. In comparison, a state like Maryland, which has an African percentage of the population that's in the high 30%, low 40 percentile for the entire state. There's a lot of Africans in the state of Maryland. Today, that state has 5 million people, Maryland, more people than Rhode Island, Maine, and Montana combined. Yet, Maryland only has 10 electoral votes. So you see how the system, and I can go on down the line and show you this, it's rigged in a way so that the Electoral College is designed to benefit the states that have low European populations, but solid European voting blocks. And this was one of the focuses these constitutional crackers had when they put this election process together, when they wrote this constitution of theirs, this toilet paper document that they wrote. This is what they wanted to ensure was protected. And one of the good things is, I move to this slide, the only reason why I have the picture of Jesse Jackson's and his 1984 presidential campaign on the slide is because one of the few things that I feel like had merit about his presidential campaign in 1984 and 1988 is he did help bring awareness to the racist history of the Electoral College. And he wanted to try to ensure that the Electoral College ability to elect presidents was dismantled. They obviously did not accomplish that, but I think that was one of the admirable elements of the campaign, not because he was running for president. Please don't confuse what I'm saying, but because of that political education that his campaign initiated and carried out. It wasn't even discussed really on a mass scale before that, to help people understand how the Electoral College rigs the election in favor of ruling class European interests. Okay, so electoral politics, as El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X said, he talked about the ballot or the bullet in 1964. And electoral politics, as he talked about, it can be a useful political tactic. But the problem is what the capitalist system has done is it has convinced us that voting is a principle, which means we can never compromise on it. Nonviolence is a principle, which means we can never compromise on it. When the reality for any logically thinking person is voting is a tactic. But you got to understand the difference between principles and strategies and tactics. Principles are values that you never compromise. For me, a principle is Africa is primary. The United Snakes will never be primary for me over the continent of Africa. A principle is that socialism is the solution. You will never see me live long enough to say that, well, maybe we should try capitalism. A principle you never compromise. For you, a principle might be, I will never place any money above my family. You can never compromise that. You can't say, well, I will never place money above my family, but I can get this Tesla over here if I snitch on my brother. Then that's not a principle for you, putting your family over money. It's a tactic, and you use it based on its effectiveness. And when it wasn't effective in helping you get that Tesla, you didn't use it. So voting is a tactic, y'all. It's not a principle. The capitalist system has convinced us it's a principle. Nonviolence is a tactic, you all. It's not a principle. The capitalist system has convinced you that it's a principle. So we have to understand that this is what Malcolm was telling us in his ballot or the bullet speech. And also, any electoral politics that we engage in has to be backed by a mass movement. What we're doing right now is absurdity. We're voting for crackers, graham crackers, and we're hoping and praying that we get something out of it. Now, this woman here, Kamala Harris, she's already said publicly, I'm not going to just do anything just for Black people. That's a quote from her. I didn't say that. That's what she said. She just said that a couple of weeks ago. She's telling you, Negroes, kiss my Black ass and cast your vote for me. And maybe something that I'm doing for everybody else will benefit you, maybe not. But kiss my Black ass and vote for me. She's telling you that. So the question has to be, how do we ensure that we have power as a people? And the way we do that, the reason why she can talk to us like that, and Obama talked to us the exact same way, and the reason why they can do that is two reasons. One, because we are so insane in the head, we are totally motivated by symbolic representation. Individuals advancing within the capitalist system. For a lot of us, we see that as progress. So we think that because this individual is president of the US, that's progress for our people. So we will accept anything they do because we're sold on the symbolism of their existence and the position they occupy. But it does nothing to advance the masses of people. We have to have a mass movement. And this picture on the screen, if you're looking at it, and you should be, it's Malcolm and Martin. But most people have seen the picture but don't have any clue what's happening in the picture. The picture was taken in June of 1964 in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol building. They were debating the Civil Rights Bill of 1964. The legislators were. And Malcolm was there to critique the contradictions in the U.S. electoral process, as he should have been, because a lot of what he has said has helped us gain the consciousness we have on this subject today. So thank God for him and those like him. Dr. King was there, respectfully, to meet with the legislators and to tell them, if you don't vote for this bill, we're going to run you out of office and make your life miserable. But they had to listen to King because King had a mass movement behind him. And those crackers knew that. And he did everything he could to constantly remind them of that. You ain't got no movement behind you. You go to them, you run up to them, you see these politicians, you run up to them, and they tell you whatever the hell they have to tell you to get you out their face. And you never hear anything else again about what you talked about, because they don't have to be accountable to you. You have no way to hold them accountable. You don't have a movement. That's your problem. So if there's a mass movement, then voting as a tactic makes a lot more sense. And that's what we need to understand about Malcolm X when he said, by any means necessary. That means that as oppressed people, everything has to be on the table. All tactics have to be on the table. We can't just say, well, this is the only thing that we can do. And the reason why oppressed people need all tactics available to us at all times is, if you deny this, then you're making the argument that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Black Panther Party, Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association, Malcolm X, the Nation of Islam, the African Party for Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the Convention People's Party in Ghana, the Land and Freedom Movement of the Mau Mau in Kenya, the Workers' People's Party in Guyana. You're saying all of these organizations, the Pan-Africanist Congress in Tanzania, all of these organizations have never accomplished anything because their primary focus was not around electoral politics. So if you say that, well, if you're not voting, you're not doing anything, you're saying that they haven't done anything. And if you're saying that, well, that was good then, but now we need to focus on electoral politics, you can't make that argument because you're not even accomplishing as much now in 2024 with electoral politics as you did during the 60s when you had a movement. At least during the 60s, you had national legislation that at least symbolically was in your favor. We're revolutionaries, so we're not arguing that we made progress in the 60s. Don't be confused. But what I'm saying is, at least in the 60s, the crackers felt that they at least had to give you the impression that you're making progress. At least they passed the Civil Rights Bill in 1964. They passed the Voting Rights Act in 1965. They pushed affirmative action forward. Now you're not getting a damn thing, and they'll tell you to your face, Negro, get your black ass out my face, or I'll have security removed. You don't even have anything that you can point to, even on a symbolic level now. And y'all still keep, if I was them, I would take you for granted too. If you're in a relationship with someone and they keep disrespecting you, all you keep doing is coming back, knocking on their door, begging for them to accept you, then you can't complain when they treat you like trash because you're acting like trash. You're not acting like a people with dignity. And the only way you can have dignity in the US capitalist electoral process is you have to have a movement that holds the capitalist system accountable, at least on the level of reform. This is not our politics, but I'm saying if you're going to do this, this is the correct way that it has to be done, right? And that means that that's the reason why, even though the UNIA, the Black Panther Party, Malcolm X, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years ago, when all those folks did their work, their contributions still supersede people like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and all of these electoral Negroes, still supersedes any contribution. These Barack Obama, Kamala Harris still supersedes. In fact, the only reason why you got Kamala Harris and Barack Obama is because of mass movement, not the other way around. You didn't vote your way into anything. You got the vote through mass struggle. And the people who sacrificed their lives to get you to vote, they have told you, if you took 5 minutes to study their words, that you have to have a mass movement to make any progress. But you have turned a blind eye and ear to them, and you instead choose to listen to our enemies who are telling you, no, don't worry about any of that. Just vote within our system. That's it. And somehow, some way, you'll make some progress. It'll be the next. If it's not this election, it's the next one. If it's not that one, it's the next one. You'll be 100 years old and dead, and you'll still be looking at the same simple, silly, stupid reality that we face. And what is that reality? Mass incarceration. Check. It hasn't been reduced. Any of these Negroes being, if you go back to 1960, we had zero. I'm talking about African people. Zero, and every other colonized people. Zero elected officials in this country. We had zero in 1960. In 2024, we have hundreds of people in U.S. Congress, at least in the hundreds. We've had governors. We have thousands of state and local elected officials. But mass incarceration has gotten worse since 1960. It hasn't gotten better, although we have these individuals in these political positions within the capitalist system. It's gotten worse. Our health disparities haven't gotten better since 1960. They've gotten worse. We're worse health-wise. That's a fact. That's a statistical fact. Shakura knows that. She can jump in and correct me if I'm lying right now. Our health disparities, she's the expert in this area. I'm not the expert, but I have a brain and I can study and understand what the hell is happening with our people. Our health disparities are worse today than they were in 1960. Our education is worse. And even some of you Negroes know that because you argue that we had better education under Jim Crow racist segregation. And although I don't agree with the way you argue about segregation, I understand what the truthful element of the argument should be, because I look at my father, who never went to college and barely graduated high school, but his entire school life was in Jim Crow segregated Louisiana. But I watched this man go to the supermarket, buy up 2 carts of groceries with no calculator and had the tax and everything added in his head. Now, I can't do that. I got to have a machine to do that for me. I watched this man because his education, and I asked him about it, and he said, well, the teachers I had lived in our community because it was segregated. My family knew them. We knew them. We knew each other. They cared about us. They babysat us when we weren't in school. Whereas when I was growing up, we were bused to these European schools that were not in our communities. The people in the communities didn't want us there, and the teachers treated us like we were prisoners in a prison yard. They didn't give a damn about our education. So, yeah, of course, education today is worse. Even with these Negroes in elected office making us all these promises, it's still worse. And our disorganization, meaning our ability to correct any of this, is worse. Everything is worse. You can't name one thing about African people in this country that's better today than it was in 1960. You can't name anything that's better today than it was in 1960. You can't name a damn thing. So your analysis about, well, we gotta vote, you sound like a damn fool if that's all you have to give us and you don't have any of these other things that we're talking about. And it's just so important. We cannot confuse political power with symbolic power. They are two completely separate things, and we confuse these things. So we have to gauge the question, how do we get tactical progress with electoral politics? We've talked about that. And we can never forget that the masses of people make history, not individuals. So just because individuals become president, that's not progress for the collective masses. That means nothing for the collective masses. Only the masses of people make history. A Negro as president of the international capitalist world power does nothing to advance the interests of the masses of African people, because capitalism was built and is maintained on our backs. So anybody in that position has to advance the capitalist system, which means they have to say what Kamala Harris said. You Negroes, I'm not doing nothing specifically for you, because that would be an attack against the capitalist system. If the system is the reason we're oppressed, and we know it is, how's she going to do something seriously for us, like guaranteed employment, for example? That could never happen in this country. Free health care. It could never happen under the capitalist system. All of these things would undermine capitalism. A serious anti-poverty program. It could never happen. You got to have poverty in a capitalist system. So as long as the African masses are disorganized, there's no political power for us within this system, this capitalist system, no matter how much we vote. But with the proper organization, we can accomplish anything. So we want to invite you to join us next week, September 15th. We're going to be talking about all these people talking about go back home, go back where you came from. We're going to be talking about when they tell you to go back where you came from. And so join us next week, same time, same place, everything. The upper left-hand QR code, APRP programs are on there. Number one, I just saw one of our comrade sisters in Ghana just launched another regular podcast. So all of them will be in there. Check them out. You can go to the Forward Ever shop, purchase revolutionary clothing, support the African Revolution, hoodcommunist.org, support Hood Communist. Please do that. Go to www.aprp-intl.org and join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. But be serious about it, okay? A lot of you do, and you reach out to me and say, hey, this program helped me. This is the reason why I breathe every day. So thank you for reaching out and saying that. I really appreciate it. I really respect. We don't know each other, but you have nothing but my love and respect. And contribute to the APRP through Venmo. It's Venmo at A-APRP and PayPal at AAPRP. And Burkina Books at the bottom, QR code on the right. That's one of our programs in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So support it. We are building capacity. We told you, all over Africa. So support us in that work and support my book so we can organize here, because that's how I finance the work that we do here. A guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence. Unfortunately, the book is only available through Amazon. Please don't reach out to me with stupidity. If you want to complain about Amazon, then show me how you're not going to Shell and Target and all that, and show me that you have a free printing press. I've sold thousands of this book, and I didn't have to spend a dime to produce the copies. I didn't have to spend, it's sold all over the world. People bought it in Africa and Europe, Central, South America, Canada. I didn't have to pay to ship it. You know how much international shipping is? So unless you have a better solution for me, I'm going to use the enemy's tools to advance our struggle. And I don't even want to hear you, because you're not even serious if you're not thinking about that the way we need to think about it, the way I think about it. But buy the book. It's only $8 US. That's how we fund our anti-fascist work. so that we can stop these white supremacists from terrorizing you. Thank you for joining us. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your day.